Nick, I want you and Daisy both to come over to my house. I'd like to show her around.
Can't you see who this guy is? With his house, his parties, and his fancy clothes.
Is all this made entirely from your own imagination?
Who is this Gatsby?
Baz, in terms of telling the story of the Great Gatsby, really wanted to respect the historical background milieu in which the story is set. However, he also wanted it to feel incredibly contemporary and also be able to sort of connect with a modern audience who weren't versed in all of the nuances of the culture of the 1920s. And so we looked to things that existed in the 1920s that might help to underline its link to contemporary fashion and its link to contemporary style notes.
When it comes to costume, there's the process of that has to start from the character. The language I like to use is that the costume is really the set because, again, I've said it before, in a shot like this, most of the frame is my shirt.
What was really interesting about Brooks Brothers for me was that they were actually the purveyor of Fitzgerald's clothes. And he, in fact, had a lengthy correspondence during his lifetime with Brooks Brothers. It was a fantastic link between the book itself and a purveyor of men's clothes that still existed to this day. I was very lucky with Brooks Brothers to be able to collaborate with them. What they allowed me to do was design not only the principal costumes, but also all of the background menswear, and to draw on their archive and the historical truths of everything that Brooks Brothers made.
Especially for a film like this where, there's going to be elements of modernism and a sort of different flair to the 1920s. She knew everything there was to know about every stitch of clothing on every character.
One of the quintessential accessories of the 1920s is a straw boater. Brooks Brothers has continuously sold straw boaters, and I think it's one of their very good selling items still to this day. And so that's something that we've made great use of in the film.
I remember Leonardo was just turning up and we were all reading, and there was a few props around. Leonardo went over and picked up a straw hat, a boater, and he put it on in the reading. He was just sort of playing with the straw boater, but you could see he was already thinking about the flashness that Gatsby has.
See, I thought you ought to know something about my life. I didn't want you to think I was just some nobody.
I think what Brooks Brothers and I managed to do is really underline the character differences between each of the men in the movie.
Nick is a little bit Fitzgerald and Fitzgerald is a little bit Nick.
You see Nick, who starts off being very well educated but relatively unsophisticated.
You see that he's a bit of an outsider. You see that he's of a different class.
Nick Carraway is from the Midwest. He's going to look a little bit more last century. He just is.
And then you watch his evolution. Of course, the costumes support that.
You see the dandy who is Gatsby, the immaculate dresser, somebody who bases himself on English royalty.
Well, Baz and Catherine, as long as I've known them, and I've known them for 20-some-odd years now, have always been a partnership, not just in life, but creatively. Baz bounces every single idea he has off of Catherine. To say that she's just there for, costumes is the biggest understatement that you could ever imagine.
And although it's loud and in your face, and he's got a cane, that was Leonardo's idea. That's what makes a great actor, and he's got the craziest, the best suit. I got a man in England who sends me clothes every year, throwing shirts to Daisy, every kind of color. He's got it all. It's flashy, it's brashy. That's not a real word, but it suits him, and it's in your facey. But somehow he makes it all gel. It's also his own style. He's got his own thing going on, so it's compelling. No wonder Tom Buchanan is worried about Jay Gatsby.
With Tom Buchanan's clothes, he is the picture of the establishment. Blue pinstripe suits, blue shirts, club ties.
When you get to Tom Buchanan, he's going to represent blue blood. He's going to represent college, collegial. The whole idea of college fashion was a new idea. And these guys belonged to it because they were saying, we belong to a special club. We're better than all of you.
Tom Buchanan, in the book, is described as being Yale educated and part of the upper echelon of the Yale Society, and that he and Nick were part of a secret society called the Skull and Bones.
Now, let's say after dinner, you and I would go into town.
Ken,
Catch up with the old wolf pack.
big day on the job tomorrow.
Nonsense! We're going.
CM lined all of my suits with a skull and crossbone. And you'll probably never see it. Although I might have to do that a few times in the movie just to show her off, you know.
The man in the pink suit went to Oxford.
Tom.
I said I went there, didn't I?
We were very lucky with Brooks Brothers to have access to their vast manufacturing arms, which allowed the clothes to have a kind of a stylish crispness that often doesn't come about when you're actually trying to cobble it together from vintage pieces or from hire houses. Everyone looks like their clothes were made to measure, and that certainly is the world that the Gatsby is set in. In the 20s, we see the birth, basically, of 20th century fashion as we know it.
I mean, you've got to understand that when F. Scott Fitzgerald comes along in the 1920s, there are mothers taking their children to court to stop them from wearing clothes that they deem to be immoral.
Just after the First World War, we see the abandonment of the kind of heavy Victorian undergarment. We see short skirts coming in. We see a kind of sexual liberation of women that allows them to be much more scantily clad. Our hosiery partner on the film, Fagal, was an intrinsic part of creating a symbol of our female characters' sexual liberation in a way.
I'm Catherine. Ain't we having a party?
In the 1920s, hosiery was a very important part of a woman's wardrobe. Although women for centuries had worn embroidered or decorated or lisle stockings, you rarely saw them because their dresses were long. And here, because dresses had become much shorter, the whole workings of stockings became a tantalising glimpse at what happened under women's dresses. You see this particularly with Myrtle, who wears a version of a 1920s trend, which is a roll-down stocking. Her character was in love with the cinema of the 1920s, with the latest trends. It seemed like a very good character choice for her. Also that it seemed slightly vulgar.
Take a picture of that!
Don't! I'm not one of those models. But you can if you want.
Similarly with her sister, who wears very fancy stockings, which we get a good look at in the Myrtle's apartment scene where they have a big party.
Next right, take one.
Great, let's do little quick adjustments, go straight away again.
Daisy Buchanan and Jordan differ from Myrtle and her sister Catherine because they're upper-class, aristocratic ladies.
Do they miss me in Chicago?
Daisy Buchanan's stockings are meant to flatter her leg, have a more Victorian or early 20th century influence. Her stockings rely more on influences of sheer and opaque that we see in the late 19th century, rather than Jordan, where the suggestion is that her stockings don't exist at all.
She was the most frightening person I'd ever seen.
Well, I've seen your face on the cover of Sporting Life. Nick Carraway.
But I enjoyed looking at her.
With Jordan, she, in Baz's eyes, symbolised the kind of cutting edge of modernity. She was a sportswoman, a sleek, almost stockingless beast that walked the earth just inside her own skin.
He gives large parties, and I like large parties. They're so intimate. Small parties, there isn't any privacy.
It was an enormously successful and terrific collaboration, and you see it showcased in almost every single scene of the movie.
Wow.
I've never worked on a film that's had such scale, but also such intricate detail in the design of it. And every costume and every set that I walk into, every time I put on a pair of Daisy's shoes or I wear some of the Tiffany's jewelry that we have on this film, you know, the engagement ring that Daisy has is just this enormous diamond. And the instant I put it on, you know, you feel different.
Oh, I love the Tiffany's jewelry. I loved it. I had never seen so many diamonds in my life.
We approached Tiffany & Co. to be partners on The Great Gatsby, really because Fitzgerald was one of their customers, and they actually hold correspondence from Fitzgerald. Louis Comfort Tiffany, who was the first very, very well-known design director of Tiffany's in the early 20th century, was somebody who frequented all of those Long Island circles that are spoken about in The Great Gatsby. So it seemed like a kind of perfect association.
I've never worn jewelry like the jewelry that we're using from Tiffany's. I've never worn diamonds like that.
These things excite me so.
Tiffany were great design partners because we invented things completely from scratch. Whether it's the Daisy motif signet ring that Gatsby wears, all of his cufflinks were designed specifically for the movie, Daisy's pearl necklace, as well as the pearl and diamond hand jewellery that she wears at the party that matches the tiara.
I had these rings that were attached to pearls that came around, and they were so delicate. I think it changes the way that you move and the way that you carry yourself, and you know that you're wearing something very beautiful and something very valuable, and it sort of changes how you move.
Tiffany allowed us to have extensive access to their archives. We not only used archival pieces that they actually own. So you can see that Jordan has a Tiffany pin, which is actually an original from the period. But also they allowed us to recreate pieces that were drawings within their archive, and you can see that on Daisy in the party she goes to at Gatsby. She's wearing a sort of tiara cum headband.
Delighted.
We were really excited about the idea of a collaboration between ourselves and Miu Miu and Prada for the two party scenes. The idea for a collaboration with Miuccia Prada really came from a friendship that she and Baz have developed over the past 15 years. This relationship dates from Romeo and Juliet, when she made a suit for Leonardo. Because of their conversations over the years and the kind of creative spark that they have between them, it seemed like she would be a marvellous collaborator to work on this movie.
Standing by, and action.
Miuccia Prada made about 20 dresses for each of the balls. They're all things that we selected out of her past collections and restyled slightly to feel more 1920s. Miuccia Prada, being very exigent from a philosophical point of view, really wanted to know how we justified the anachronistic choice of this collaboration. Both Baz and I felt very strongly that Prada as a brand and as a design force looks to the past for a lot of its inspiration, but it's always done in a way that looks completely towards the future. And you can see that in Kerry's dress, the crystal dress.
Is all this made entirely from your own imagination?
There were crystal dresses in the 1920s, big beaded dresses, and this cast my mind to thinking about the chandelier dress that Miuccia Prada had made for one of her collection, and she reprised this look for Daisy in the party scene when she goes to one of Gatsby's extraordinary parties. And I think that it's the perfect mixture of old and new, of beauty and elegance and modernity all coming together in a kind of a fusion of sparkle. So she uses all these historical references, but in an unexpected and modern way. And that was very much the spirit of the 20s, and it fitted in absolutely with the way that Baz wanted to tell this story of Gatsby, that it have absolutely contemporary relevance, but also be very rooted in its historical basis. On top of all that, Miuccia Prada's dresses are really beautiful. The kind of encrusted nature that very often is used in Prada. This works extremely well in 3D.
Hold the look, Kasha, hold the look, and cut. Lovely, back to once.
An actor makes the character, the director makes the film, the script provides the story that everyone tells, and clothes are just there to provide an adjunct and a support system to the characterisation of the actor. Now, I'm lucky enough to have a lot of strong support in that because I've worked with incredible actors and a great director, a great script, and so you don't have very, you're lucky.